Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. I'm glad that you're joining with me today. We'll be continuing in our reading of Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, and today reading the story Mystery. Stay with us as we read through the story and then offer some reflections. I was late for what was to be my last visit with my mother. Pushing through rush hour traffic, tired from a long day at the office, I stopped to buy her some flowers. It was 7 p.m. and the florist had no purple irises, my mother's favorites, and little of anything else. Sympathizing with my distress, he offered me a bouquet of half-closed iris buds from his icebox, assuring me that they would open in a few hours. I took them and waited, irritated and impatient, as he wrapped them in green tissue, a strange-looking bouquet. Then I hurried on. Carrying the flowers, I pushed through the heavy doors of the ward. A nurse was waiting there for me. "I'm so sorry," she said. My mother had died a short time before. Stunned, I allowed myself to be led to her room. She lay in her bed, seemingly asleep. Her hands were still warm. The nurse asked if there was anyone I wanted her to call. Numbly, I gave her the numbers of some of my oldest friends and sat down to wait. It was peaceful and very still in the room. One by one, my friends came. 4 days later, I was 3,000 miles away arranging for my mother's burial. It was an unseasonably hot spring, and New York City was at its worst, muggy and uncomfortable. The funeral director was a person of sensitivity and kindness. Gently he went over the arrangements, assuring himself, and me again, of the details of my mother's wishes, which we had discussed on the phone. Then he paused. "There was something that came from California with your mother. May I show you?" he asked. Together we walked down the corridor to where my mother lay in her closed pine coffin. Lying on the coffin lid, still in the twist of green tissue paper, was the bouquet I had left in my mother's hospital room on her bed. But now the irises were in full bloom. I remember them still with great clarity, each one huge and vibrant, seemingly filled with a purple sort of light. They had been out of water for 4 days. It would be easy indeed to dismiss this sort of experience, not to make a simple shift in perspective, or find a willingness to suspend disbelief for a moment. Not to consider adding up the column of figures in another way and wonder. The willingness to consider possibility requires a tolerance of uncertainty. I will never know whether or not I was once for a moment in the presence of my Russian grandmother, or if my mother used my final gift of flowers to make me a gift of her own, letting me know that there may be more to life than the mind can understand. This week's story, Dr. Remen offers us something a bit different than what she usually does. It feels a bit different this week because this is a story about mystery. This is a story about things that you can't make sense of. I think it fits in with her larger themes in general of a kind of wholeness of experience, that you can't just explain things in one way, that there's a depth to our lives. But there's something a little bit different here, perhaps even a bit magical, we might call. The flowers really still exist. They're still in full bloom 4 days later without any water. How's that possible? But what I think Dr. Remen is trying to point us towards is to say, stop. Don't ask that logical or rational question. Put that aside and embrace the mystery. There are going to be times in our life where we encounter something mysterious. Take a moment and think for yourself. Has there ever been a time where you encountered something totally mysterious? Something that you really could not put your hands around, something that you could not explain. I imagine each of us has had a moment like that in our lives. whether we personally experienced it or we know that someone else did. And those are moments that force us and challenge us to look at life differently, to encounter life and the powers and forces that live in our world in a different light. So my short reflection for today is to take that moment, to look at the world perhaps in a different type of way, to see if there are moments that we can embrace and open ourselves up to the mystery of life. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you've enjoyed this reflection, and I look forward to seeing you soon.